Good evening, everyone. Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits here, and welcome to our Friday night gin tasting. I'm joined tonight by Bryce Parsons of Last Best Brewing and Distilling. How are you, Bryce?
I'm pretty good, Kyle. How are you?
I'm all right.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday to you. Happy Tech Support Friday. We've had a few little issues here, but I think we got all squared away in the end. So you're going to be joining us to talk predominantly about the two products that you make. We, of course, are doing 4 gins. So I will start this thing off a little bit here. We're going to talk very generally about gin for kind of the first one here and talk about how gin's made and that sort of thing while we taste the Whistling Andy. So in your kits, you have sample number 1, the Whistling Andy Cucumber Gin. I'm going to briefly touch on a little bit of a people's history of cucumber gin. Cucumber gin really does begin and end with Hendrick's, which they would have you believe comes from 1886, which is a complete and massive lie. The William Grant Company started in 1886, and they have, for the overwhelming majority of their history, made whiskey like Glenfiddich and Grant Standfast and that sort of thing. Hendrick's gin was invented in about 1999 because they were looking for a new premium spirit to launch that was not just a traditional London dry gin. We carry a few cucumber gins now as well. Burwood Distilling does make one, as does Whistling Andy. Shut up, Aaron. So yes, Whistling Andy is out of Big Fork, Montana. This is brought in by my good friend Jonathan Bray. This is one where I'm not sure we're gonna taste it with tonic, but this is not a tonic style of gin. This is very much a martini style gin. Which might be a good time to actually talk about the one of your gins we're not tasting tonight, which is the Afterglow. Do you want to talk a little bit about a gin that's really designed for tonic and cocktails versus a gin that's maybe a little gentler and a little smoother?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, with Afterglow, out of the 3 gins, it is the third one, and it kind of was. So here it is. Here it's in a purple versus the blue or orange, and how we did it is when we decided to launch gin. So the story with us kind of launching gin, we were it was roughly about a year ago, closed down Last Best, the restaurant, and we didn't know what was going to happen, and there's a lot of uncertainty with COVID and everything, and so of course there was a lot of times of pivoting. And how we decided to pivot, we were selling a bunch of beer still, but then looking at we have all these gins that we kind of do and no one really knows about them, and Afterglow was one of those gins. This came out after a project I did a couple years ago that was 52 gins in 1 year, which we'll get into that a little bit later with the other 2. I took a bit of a hiatus, and then I created this Afterglow gin after it because our customers were wanting something that was very approachable, low juniper level, and exactly like something that was a cocktailing gin, something that was great in gin and tonic, something fresh and lively. We picked up this gin. We started doing this gin, focusing on fresh Thai basil. At the time, there was a vertical farm in Calgary that was starting up, and they were doing Thai basil for us, and we wanted to use it in the gin. And then lemon verbena, and we just wanted to kind of keep it really nice and light and approachable. So that's kind of what we did. Still kept the alcohol though at 46%. Really, that's for cocktailing. You need a little bit of strength to kind of hold up in the drink. But we were really kind of thinking about gin sodas, gin tonics, gin sonics, which is soda and tonic, with this product.
Beautiful. Do you want to give me a little bit of your background with cucumber gins? I mean, I think we all started with Hendrick's. You made 52 gins in a year. You must have made a cucumber gin. What do you feel about them? Are they a fad? Are they now an established style? Are they ever going to go away?
I don't think they'll go away. I think as far as cucumber flavor or within a profile of gin will always be there. And sure, like Hendrick's has done a great job. I think on the Hendrick's side of it is what they did really well with cucumber is they used a typical garnish that was either a lime in North America, a lemon in the UK, that was going with a heavy London dry juniper gin. They switched it up and made this kind of fresh cucumber tonic, and focus around that was extremely really different, but cucumber was really familiar. And then that's kind of taken off in making these cucumber gins. And cucumber isn't really the easiest botanical to work with either. It kind of gets mushy. There's some people that have gone around and used a botanical borge as well that gives off some cucumber notes. And then actually with the 52, I actually never really did a cucumber gin, focusing just on cucumber with it. Simply, I always used it within the garnish and everything, but I don't think it's anything that's going to go away anytime soon. It just pairs so well with the concept of gin and how gin is used in cocktails. So it's going to be around for a long, long time, and I'm actually excited to see kind of what comes out of it.
Beautiful. So for tasting note on this, for me, I mean, the cucumber is very dominant. There's definitely some juniper in the background. I've been trying to actually get some tech sheets or some information on this. Jonathan, if you're watching, your email did not go through. I checked 5 minutes before we went to air, and your tech note did not come through, so I apologize for that. They both say on the back of the label, and they also say on their website, 8 botanicals. I assume one of which has to be juniper and one of which has to be cucumber. They do not say what the actual list is anywhere online or on their label or anywhere, so I genuinely don't know. I do know it's made from a blend of different grains, predominantly wheat, and it is made in Montana. On its own, it's very laid back, it's very mild. When I taste this, I feel like this is going to disappear with tonic. We are not happily using Schweppes or Canada Dry or garbage tonic. We did go with Fever Tree, and I am adding just the absolute lightest splash to this because I'm very afraid with this that I'm gonna drown it. Because when you've got a very light gin, it is very easy to drown it. I think that was about the right amount. I get a little bit of sweetness from the tonic. I get that nice kind of bitter lemon character. And the cucumber does show through, but even that tiny splash of tonic, I don't always like cucumber with tonic. I think that's a much better soda gin. For what you have to pay for a premium cucumber gin, if you're adding tonic to it, you might as well have just bought Gordon's because you're just gonna drown it. So I think the Whistling Andy, best suited to being entirely on its own. I also immediately broke my own rule and put the tonic in this glass, which I brought a specific glass just for the tonic so that I didn't get tonic in my bloody... Can you get me a new tasting glass, Aaron? I've ruined this already. It is Gin 1 and I've ruined everything. I do not think you're in a place to complain. All right,
Kyle,
so
one thing I want to add on the technical side with using cucumber too, including Hendrick's, a lot of producers, because cucumber is actually so hard to capture the essence of cucumber, the essence is actually added afterward.
Really?
If you look at Hendrick's, it's called a distilled gin for a reason, because the rose and the cucumber are added afterward. So all the other botanicals go in distillation, but those 2 botanicals specifically are added afterwards as a natural extract.
So let's talk a little bit about, because we're going to jump into the first of your gins here with the Fortunella. Let's talk a little tiny bit about, the various ways you can make gin. You can make it using a vapor box. You can make a macerated gin. You can add flavoring extracts afterwards, which I think is, largely cheating. Do you want to talk about gin making in a nutshell, and then we'll dive into the Fortunella, the first of your gins? Or the first of your gins we're going to taste tonight, at least.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right on the different ways to make it, and I think it goes one step even before that is there's maceration. That goes kind of 2 ways. Like maceration or steeping, they're the same thing. It's similar how you make tea at home. You take the tea leaves, you put it in water. In this case, it's the botanicals, which in the distilling world is botanicals, in the cooking world it's herbs and spices, and you steep them in a mixture of alcohol and water. Now, you could do that, and you could bottle it if you want. It's going to be kind of like a brown, yellow liquid, and that's called like a bathtub gin or just a gin. That's really more of like the crude ways of gin, like way back, during the gin craze. What you usually do is then distill it after that, and as you're boiling that liquid, that flavor gets vaporized and it gets carried with the alcohol, which then you condense back to a liquid, you collect that, and that's your gin. That's a steeped or a macerated gin. And the most classic, well-known example is Tanqueray with that. When you're making it too, like you could get all into the geekery of, what's your alcohol strength that you're steeping at? How long do you steep at? You kind of get those questions, or you have to figure that out on how you're making your gin. The next kind of after that is vapor infused. that's where you're not steeping something. You have a vapor basket or a box, and you put all the botanicals in there. And as long as there's like an inlet and an outlet for the steam to go through, and just like how you like would steam vegetables at home, you're steaming these botanicals, but you're steaming them with a mixture of water and alcohol. And that alcohol level changes throughout the distillation, but you're pulling different flavor. You're pulling the flavors out of the botanicals. You're pulling it out while that's happening over the gin run or the distillation run. And then once again, you're condensing it down to a liquid, and you're capturing that as well. There's also vacuum distillation, can be either or, usually steeped, but you're creating a vacuum into the environment of the still, which you can distill at a lower temperature. So rather than say 78 degrees, 80 degrees Celsius, you can do it down as 40, 45 if you want, depending on the vacuum. So there's different ways in how you do it, and there's a lot of conversation, maybe a little bit of arguments on which botanical is best in what part of the process. For our gins, we have the capability of doing the steeping method and the vapor method all in the same still in one run.
Do you use a column or a pot still, or a little bit of both?
We use, so our still at last best is what they call a combination still, and that's a combination of a column and a pot. And there's different types of columns too. Like there's essentially different ways to skin a cat in distillation. So ours is a batch style still that we go through. For our gin process, it's more similar to like a pot still style.
It's almost sounding like a Loman still.
Yeah, that would be it. Exactly. So, like the Botanist, for example, like by Bruichladdich, that is a similar. Like that has a pot. There's like 6 botanicals that are put in, steeped, macerated in the pot, and then all the remaining, I forget how many that are in there, are in the vapor path.
So it's basically,
that's kind of similar to what we do too.
It's all more or less like a pot still base, and then you've actually got a very small column that kind of sits on top. I know the guys at Bruichladdich call it Ugly Betty. I actually got to see that still sitting in really poor condition on a pallet a few years before they actually got started making Botanist. They are ugly fucking stills. They do not look like elegant and pretty, but they're certainly efficient and they make beautiful products.
Yeah, it's very effective. With it. And ours is similar. Ours is a bit nicer looking, but we have ours. If you ever come into Last Best, like you'll see our pot that's in the corner, and then there's 4 plates, the little 4 sight glasses, and then there's 2 doors above that are stainless steel, and those are our gin baskets. We actually have a double gin basket that we put in to the still because we were thinking we're going to use a lot of vapor infusion, and then beside that is our columns, but we bypass those columns in our gin runs, and then it goes right down to the condenser after that.
Grant asks, what's your base grain? What's the base spirit that you're working with, and is it the same base spirit across all 3 gins?
Yes, same base spirit. And we use a wheat neutral grain spirit that we actually bring in. So we're rectifying these gins there. We initially did our own base spirit, like it was a tri-malt spirit that was barley, wheat, and oats, all malted. But then we switched to a wheat neutral spirit that we just felt the profile was a lot cleaner there as well.
And you're looking for cleanness in the base spirit so that the botanicals really have a chance to shine.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of debate on how you do this and go from it. Like all the major gin players are using, a neutral base. North America tends to, try to make their own base as well and have some sort of provenance, there, which is really, honorable and good as well. You really have to, when you're designing these products, you have to decide what kind of shines and what doesn't. With it, and we just found that when we were making these products, especially with citrus in the Fortunella, the nuances were far greater that you'd pick up the orange and then you'd pick up the juniper, while if our base spirit, because we didn't have the ability in our still to go completely neutral, it kind of muddied the waters a little bit.
All right, well, that's as good a segue as I'm going to get. So let's jump into the Fortunella. Tell us about the Fortunella gin that everybody hopefully has in their glasses by now and hasn't already drained their ounce. Hopefully not. Let's talk some Fortunella gin.
Yeah, so Fortunella gin, it's the orange one here. This one was actually going back to when I was saying I did 52 gins in 1 year. It was actually both Fortunella and Savage Love were part of that program. And kind of talking to our customer base, our staff, and everything of some of their favorite gins. These were the two gins that they really liked. And we wanted to look at. We already knew we were going to do Afterglow. That was kind of in the market. It had a bit of a following. And then we wanted to go and do. Since we had a low juniper level, we wanted to do a medium and a high juniper level, just as a gauge that when we kind of have the three there. Of, all right, where do you want to fit, or where do you want to start in your kind of gin journey? And when we knew Afterglow had more of a contemporary angle, we knew Savage Love was going to be more of the London Dry or more of a heavy juniper angle. And so we decided with Fortunella to kind of right in the middle, a very, very basic botanical load, of the classic juniper, coriander, angelica root, orris, and kind of more of like what I call the Tanqueray botanical mix. And then just as the twist, I was really loving like orange. Like when you're working with all these citruses and making gin, you kind of get your favorite citrus, and I was really loving orange, and so that's where we did some sweet orange peel, bitter orange peel, and then fresh mandarin that we put in the still. And how we do that, we macerate everything for this gin until right before we distill. We take the fresh mandarins and we cut them in half. We rip the peel off, the peel goes in the vapor baskets, and then the flesh goes right into the pot, and then we close up the still and start it. And that's where you get the freshness of orange right away. And then the back end with having some licorice root in there adds that sweetness that kind of comes in. The licorice root doesn't really add what we think of licorice, like star anise licorice. It adds sweetness. So that's where the candied orange peel note comes in.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that the licorice was giving you that, but yeah, that does make absolute sense. So,
yeah. If you distill just licorice, it's kind of like this muted, woody, sweet, like sugar wood. Kind of, I always think of sugar, whatever sugar wood would be. That's it. And then with this one too, this one was big. We won the Canadian gold medal at the World Gin Awards on this one for best classic style gin.
Beautiful. Give us a tasting note on this one, please, sir.
Tasting note on Fortunella, you right off the bat, you should be getting kind of that fresh orange, fresh mandarin right off the bat. Then right tucked behind there, you'll get the juniper coriander kind of mix there. The body will be not necessarily too long and lingering, but it'll be there and it'll just kind of meld into that sweetness, that sweet candy peel. So you get orange in the front top note, and you finish off with like a candied orange peel, but right in the middle is that juniper coriander note.
Beautiful. This with tonic, I can't imagine this is really designed to be too much of a gin and tonic gin. What have you obviously had something in mind when you were making it. How did you expect people to drink it? And am I going to completely ruin it by adding tonic?
Not necessarily, and I don't think really, it will be fine with tonic. What I find when kind of bringing up, and I'm glad you're using Fever Tree, right?
We are, yeah, because they come in the adorable little cans.
Yeah, it's my favorite tonic. The whole gin and tonic kind of scenario that's happening now is you have sometimes, if you're going with a lot of the craft gins or very bold style gins, and you're going with bold style tonics, they don't really fit. There's too much going on, right? But you have to look at how things came to play. You have predominantly in the market London Dry gins, so juniper heavy, and then really nothing else, which then tonic makers found an opportunity to add more flavor, because that's what really people wanted to pair with that. And then now you had a whole bunch of premium tonics, and now you're getting bold gins. They don't necessarily go. So what I find, I don't really design my gins for strictly tonic, but I do find they really work well in a tonic and soda mix. And so you kind of lengthen out everything. with this one, we were just kind of having fun on what we could kind of throw in with cocktails. Essentially, this is what our bartenders really, you know, if they're kind of thinking of something like a riff on something, this is what they go for. So, for example, like a cosmopolitan, rather than like citrus vodka, you know, using a Fortunella gin in a cosmopolitan and kind of bringing back that like mid 2000s vibe.
That might actually possibly accomplish the impossible and make a cosmopolitan I wouldn't hate. Yeah, that actually sounds pretty good.
We both Afterglow and Fortunella work really well as a substitute for tequila and a margarita.
Ooh.
You know, so you keep freshness. You know, you have lime, and it'd be a lime margarita too, right? But you have the lime. You have, you know, so that's kind of where when we start thinking like how it's kind of designed for that. We do have a bunch of canned cocktails that we've released with these gins just recently.
Yep. We actually carry 2 out of the 3 so far.
Cool. So with this one is like we actually mix it with like a black tea, a hard iced tea, kind of thinking like an orange pico, you know, Earl Grey kind of riff a little bit, and so it pairs fairly well with that. So I think there's a lot of, this is a very versatile type gin that people come up with.
You know, it's funny you said I never really got the idea that, you know, these premium tonics are so big and so punchy and so flavorful. I always like them because they have so much less sugar than especially Schweppes. It's just, Schweppes has so much sugar, it might as well be Coca-Cola. It's absolutely horrifying how much sugar is in commercial tonics. I like things like Fever Tree or Q-Tonic or Porter's Syrup or whatever, not because it's necessarily more flavorful, but just it's drier. I can't deal with the sugar. And even this definitely has some sweetness to it, and while it seems to me quite sweet because I don't like sugar in cocktails, it's still already so much drier than Schweppes. If I had Schweppes here, I'd just be horrified. And that works with this. The lemon coming off of the tonic and the orange in this play really well together, and it comes off almost like almost a oddly delicious sparkling lemonade in a certain way. I quite like that with this.
I find the fresh citrus, like in the fresh orange, when you add carbonation to it, like that effervescence of that carbonation and those bubbles really pronounce, you know, make the aromatics of the citrus come out and pop. It's a very inviting, a very inviting kind of sensation when you're really kind of just getting in the nose. And a lot of times with this, like I'll drink out of we're a brew pub, so you know it's not like we have fancy wine glass or anything, but we use stemless wine glasses, and I'll sit there and make a bunch of gin cocktails. So if I have a gin and tonic or a gin tonic soda, you know, I will do it in that because the bowl of the glass really captures that effervescence right when you add some carbonation.
Perfect. Got a question from Kevin. He really loves aviation cocktails. Which of your gins do you think does best in an aviation?
I would probably say I would go with like the Afterglow, but if you want it super punchy, the Savage Love. And if you like aviation, if you like, and if you want to go like aviation and Corpse Reviver #2, I always kind of, you know, for some reason when I'm out drinking, if I'm drinking gin cocktails, I'll usually have those two side by side. I don't know, like I'll have one or the other, and then I want one or the other.
So I'm very familiar with an aviation. For those of you at home who don't know, aviations are gin, lemon juice, creme de violette, and maraschino liqueur. What's in, you said a Corpse Survivor #2?
Corpse Reviver #2.
Corpse Reviver #2, pardon me.
Yeah.
What's in a Corpse Reviver?
So that's a gin. It's what is it? Gin, citrus. I'm going to have to look it up. You're stumping me right now.
You actually accidentally answered Cynthia's question before I even posed it to you. What's your favorite gin cocktail? You just naturally branched into that, which is great.
Yeah, it's not really like Corpse Reviver isn't necessarily my favorite too. I'm a kind of more like a Negroni person, which Fortunella is my favorite gin for Negroni.
Oh yeah, the orange would play with that so well.
Yeah.
I have Wikipedia.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think Aaron's got it. Aaron, why don't you tell us what Wikipedia says a Corpse Reviver #2 is?
Let What do we have?
That's it.
Alcoholic
Ready?
pure. I don't know.
So it's gin, triple
There you
sec, Lila Blanc, lemon juice, and then absinthe.
Oh wow, that is a hell of a drink. I
Yeah.
genuinely, I've never had a cocktail with absinthe in it that I've actually liked. I'd be really interested to try that, actually. That sounds great.
Yeah, it's a, and why the number 2 is because there's gin. The original Corpse Reviver had cognac in it. And the absinthe very, it's just kind of like a rinse of the glass, too. But why it was done, it's like a 3-ounce martini style gin cocktail, super boozy. And, essentially when you're, had a bunch the night before and you're up in the morning and you want to wake up, like it's reviving your corpse.
I like it. I'm right there for that. We're going to move on a little bit, and we're going to do the Sheringham Seaside Gin. I'm sure you're familiar. This has become a bit of a staple for a lot of gin drinkers these days. This is actually a line I brought in for their Akavit, because I'm just a giant Akavit nut. We got talked into the gin as well. Now we carry not only their Seaside Gin, we carry their Kazuki Gin. I just got a request today for their Rhubarb Gin, and now they're actually leaning into the alcohol-free spirits side, and they have a couple of alcohol-free gin substitutes. The big thing for Sheringham Seaside is they use hand-harvested local kelp, which adds a real saline, salty component to the gin. And they do predominantly locally harvested botanicals. I'll actually pose this to you. I know that a lot of the botanicals that you probably use can't be grown in Alberta, but do you have a bit of a local botanical side to your distillation, or is it just like, no, I can get better stuff from elsewhere? I don't need to lower my bar to Alberta botanicals.
You're kind of setting me up here a little bit.
I'm setting you up to go on a rant one way or the other.
So with these gins, no, we don't really have like an Alberta local angle, and it's not anything. It's just how these gins were when we were thinking these gins together. I constantly kind of go back to go for an all Alberta style gin, but obviously juniper. We don't grow here. We grow juniper. It's just not the right juniper. It's like an alpine juniper. So most juniper that gin makers use are either from Italy or Macedonia. The stuff that you'll go hiking in Kananaskis or anything like that, it's like an alpine style juniper, and the flavor isn't what you would expect from juniper. It gives like a ton of bubblegum note. When I was doing the 52 gins in 1 year, however, I actually had a grower by Sylvan Lake that grew over 100 botanicals for me to see what grows really well in the market in Alberta, and it was very interesting. So like coriander, Alberta grows really great coriander. With that, there is like some mosses that are great. There's some sages that are great that work. What else is there? Angelica grows fairly well. So there is things. The problem with Alberta, we don't really have, we don't grow them in volume, and we don't really have people harvesting them either. So it's kind of a crop we don't really focus on, and that makes it very difficult when you're kind of wanting to have consistency in your product. It would be kind of a seasonal type thing. Like I know, like our friends like at Wildlight, for example, they do a release every year that like has an Alberta local spin, but you kind of have to keep it to that. So Alberta isn't necessarily the best growing area for botanicals, but that doesn't mean that we can't make great gin at the same time.
Fully respect that answer. Yep.
Yeah.
I got some questions coming in. Cynthia asks, what's the strangest botanical you've ever tried or seen in a gin?
Tried or seen.
Or heard of even.
Well, okay. So tomato is an interesting one. It's not like wild or anything. Like it's not a wild concept to put in tomato. There's the black tomato gin that I think has done a really good job. I don't really I don't think I would necessarily use it. But I've also used, like, in that 52 gins, I used oyster shells, for example.
Really?
Yeah, I used, yeah, like you could use
For what?
all.
For the salt, for the little bit of the aroma of the sea. What were you going for?
It was kind of like the salt and brininess of it. So there's Rodney's Oyster House in Calgary. We worked with them, on it. They got a whole bunch of oysters, and they saved them for us, and we just kind of crushed them up and put them all in the vapor path just to kind of get a briny note, to it. So that's been done. I don't know. There's just all sorts. I would say that's a bit of a weird one. Um, but I also like, and it wasn't for a gin. A couple years ago, I did a Pachunga style aquavit that was like an Alberta rendition that used raw bison meat. 2.5 kilos of raw bison meat in the
Why
still.
is it every distiller has to make akavit? It's just this thing. It's like when you go so far past being into cognac and gin and mezcal and sotol and everything else, it's like, you know what I really like? I like akavit. Every head distiller I've ever talked to is like, you know what I drink at home is akavit, because that's just the best thing ever. And I've become one of those people, and I very bizarrely become one of those people, and I really like it as well. What goes into your akavit? And also,
Well,
how can I
so
get some of your akavit? Because that's the immediate lead-in question.
okay, so there's two. So this one that had the bison in it, that was, so at one time, we had two distilleries. We had one up in Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo Brewing Brew Pub. There's a little still up there. So that's what we did that for, and that was kind of more of like a Mexican spice spin on an aquavit. So still tons of caraway, but we added some cumin, some cinnamon. We had some orange peel in there as well. This bison meat, and it was just like very meaty, type of spirit. We also aged it in 50 liter, 50 or 55 liter new number 4 char barrels as well. And we called it meat sweat. And we have a was like, it's, yeah, like it's primal. Like that's literally that's like a flavor descriptor. Like it's primal.
I
And
like it.
I'll get you a bottle.
All
We have
right.
some kicking around, and you'll open it up and you'll be like, yep,
That's
there's a
primal.
primal quality out there.
I
We do
absolutely can't
another
wait.
we do another one. We do another one for private. So we work with it's the Skull, Skal organization out of Banff and Jasper. They're kind of a hospitality club, or association, and when they start their meetings, they start their meeting with a shot of aquavit, or aquavit every day for every meeting. So then they asked if we would kind of do one, and we kind of started doing it as a side. We do it on our test still for them, and that's more of a classic style that uses the caraway. We use, I think there's celery seed, there's fresh dill, there's dill seed, there's lemon peel, coriander, white peppercorn that we do there, and we actually do we do that with our tri-malt base spirit. But
That sounds
that
rad.
usually works. That's just for them. But if you're, I'm always looking for aquavit lovers, so
Yeah,
you should try that one too,
I will.
because it's a lovely category, but it's just not popular.
No,
It's
I
kind of like
can't
how
give it
it's
away.
kind of like how IPA was in like the 90s for beer. I think there's a lot of promise. I just don't know when it will ever get there.
You know, it's funny. I say I can't give it away. I carry 4 akavits right now. I carry Brennevin, the 2 by whatever the Danish house that I can actually get at the minute, and then I carry Long Table's akavit out of BC, which actually is very good. Their gin's
Yeah.
actually not bad either. But yeah, I love akavit. And it does sell pretty well. I actually walked past our liqueur section a couple of days ago, and all of our akavit was gone, and I had no idea who had bought it all. I ended up looking up in the computer, and somebody had come in and bought 8 bottles of akavit. They'd literally bought every bottle of akavit we had displayed. I was like, okay, cool. I have no idea who this person was. It happened after I'd gone home. But apparently there are still people out there who really like it. So, okay,
That's
so
dope.
I'm going to talk a little bit about tasting notes on the Sheringham Seaside. Obviously not your product. I'm not going to ask you to comment on it, but if you want to, you're more than welcome to jump in on this. Like I said, they use the winged kelp to give it a bit of a saline quality. Otherwise, it's juniper, coriander, rose, lavender, and citrus. And I think this gin's more of an all-rounder sort of thing. To me, very much like the Afterglow in the sense that it's not super high in alcohol, it's not overpoweringly juniper, it's just a nice all-rounder. It can do multiple things. You can do something like gin and tonic. You can do a martini if you want to. You could put it in a Negroni. There are probably better applications for any of those specific things, but this is a nice gin that does multiple things. And it actually shows up better than I would have expected with tonic. And once again,
Yeah, I think you're right, Kyle.
Glass.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's really a great powerhouse, kind of all around gin that works really well. We've carried on the Last Best bar for quite a long time too, just to kind of show some gin respect to other grape makers that are in the area.
Craig suggests I can make Akavit popular, get it on the tasting. You know what, Craig? I did my best with Grappa. We've done Mezcal and Sotol. I mean, this is only going to be the first of our gin tastings for this year. We're probably going to do another one in July or August. Spoiler warning. I don't think even I could make an Akavit tasting sell. As much fun as it would be, I don't know if we could actually sell more than like 10 of them. It'd be funny. But, you know, Grappa was my complete vanity project. I don't actually expect to sell any. And we did quite well with it, but still, it's the only spirits tasting we've ever done that did not actually sell out. Also, by the way, I would like to point out we sold out 48 kits of this, and thank you all so very, very much. I really appreciate that. We did completely sell out the gin tasting tonight, so that was really nice of everyone.
Hey-o.
Bryce, I'll ask you to bear with us just for a sec here. We're going to do Shameless Promotion Corner and talk about what we have coming up next. Because we have 2 upcoming tastings racing up on us here very shortly. On Wednesday night next week, we have Adam from Snake Lake Brewing. He is joining us for a beer tasting. It's been about a year since we caught up with Adam. The last time, you know, we talked to him, you know, they just launched their Brighter Horizons, and things are a little different now. We're going to do a couple of cores. We're going to do the Sidewinder IPA and their Kennebec Pills, a beer that we have not done on the channel yet and really ought to have. Total oversight on our part. This beer rules. And then we are going to do the Not a Hazy Pale Ale and the Prairie Dreams New England Pale. So a little bit of West Coast Pale, a little bit of East Coast Pale. So kind of a fun little tasting. Adam's always an absolute laugh and a half, so we're really looking forward to that. Now, Friday next week, 1 week from today, we are nipping back to Spain. This is a winery that we've been expecting for quite some time, and it is rolling in just in time for spring. I say as it's probably goddamn snowing outside. But sure, just in time for spring. This is Success. This is a Spanish winery from Tarragona. They have 3 wines on the market for us. They have a white, a red, and a rosé, and they are all bright, fresh, natural, low alcohol, super fun, super crunchy, like very much spring wines. These are things you want to just crush on the patio, even the red. And then we're going to actually contrast that with a wine that Devin and I really... This is not a wine that Devin and I typically would like. It's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. It's from Spain. It's 14.5% alcohol. It's from La Mancha, which is one of the hottest parts of Spain. It sounds like something that, in particular, Devin would really hate. We both really, really like this, and I think that's very interesting. So we're going to contrast 3 very bright, fresh, crunchy wines with kind of a more traditional oak-aged, rich, full-bodied, powerful red. So if you're doing like a steak night out on the back patio, so that would be very fun. Tickets for this one are $85 and gets you, of course, all 4 bottles of wine. I'm not going to announce a guest for next week because it's not confirmed yet, but our good friend Eric Mercier from Juice Imports is the importer for Success. He has not gotten back to us at this point, so we cannot say for sure he'll be joining us, but we have certainly asked. Thank you for bearing with us, Bryce. Do you want to talk about the Savage Love? Because I'm stoked for this. This is my style of gin.
Yeah, absolutely. This is well, I kind of bounce around these 3 gins depending on how my day's going, but you know, if I'm really wanted to, you know, kind of get into it, this is the one. So as we said with Afterglow Fortunella, we have low juniper, medium juniper, and this would be the high juniper gin. We wanted big, bold, herbaceous. Shouldn't say, yeah, like just a big, bold, herbaceous, stand-up style gin. And so this was part of the 52 as well. It was one of the most popular ones. And with it, I love when you mix herbaceous with floral, and this is what we went with here. So with all my gins, there's usually two botanicals I kind of bring to the forefront. That's kind of my style. So loads of juniper, but in this one was white sage and lavender. White sage is a fairly unique botanical, actually, in gin making, simply because a lot of gins are made in Europe, and there's not a lot of white sage that's there. White sage is kind of more to this part of the world, and it really kind of brings the eucalyptus note and props up the juniper and adds, it's such a complementary note to it. And then the thing is, this was a challenging gin to do as well, because whenever you're using lavender on the label sounds really good. If you want to sell some gin, put lavender. But the problem is how you're balancing it in your gin is fairly difficult. You go too much, it starts tasting like shampoo. And so you have to figure out where to tuck it. And that's what this, the sage and the lavender working together, where it goes, juniper, sage, like big herbaceous notes, and then the floral lavender is just tucked behind that. Then you bring in like the complementary notes of the citrus. So we did a sweet orange peel and a lemon peel that are in this as well. Spiciness of green cardamom, angelica and coriander obviously as complementary notes with the juniper. Also those three, juniper, coriander, and angelica, that kind of gives the gin flavor. Like if you made a gin with just juniper, it really doesn't taste like gin.
No, it wouldn't. It would just taste like piney liquid. It would be nasty.
Yeah. Piney, fruity, kind of, depending on where you get your juniper. Yeah, like even though you could call it gin, it doesn't really kind of do that.
I think angelica is really the flavor that more people actually associate with gin without knowing it, because angelica is it's in everything. And it really is like the defining note for so many gins is the angelica.
Yeah, and it's a really cool botanical to use because you could really kind of drive your woody notes with it. I actually really like high angelica additions when you're doing barrel aged gins. I think it really holds up well. Like a citrus forward gin and barrel aging, I don't think really holds up well. But yeah, so with this one, it was like we just wanted this kind of like powerhouse, punchy, kind of bold gin. We also put it at 47%, because at the time that was roughly that was one of the most strongest Alberta made gins out there, other than some barrel aged, special releases. But for kind of a mainstay brand, it was one of the strongest ones out there. This was out of the three designed to be the dark horse. It wouldn't be necessarily for the mass audience that wanted something light or something familiar. This was like, I don't like gin because of juniper. Well, too bad. This is what it is, and the juniper lovers are going to love this, and you're going to make great cocktails with it. It's nice and bold and punchy.
Well, you say that,
so that's what it was for.
I'm getting more positive comments on this than I think all of the other three gins combined. This has been the smash hit of the evening already, and we're just dipping our toe into it. Like, this is the one that I've gotten more comments on already, just this, than everything else. So you definitely found your audience with this one here.
Well, that's great. And when I said it was designed to be the dark horse, doesn't mean that it's not going to be the lead horse. And really, that's what it's turning into be. We're very excited with this. It's actually its canned cocktail that was released with it is a Tom Collins called the Savage Tom Collins, and it's, I think, by far going to be one of the more popular ones out of the three that are there. It's challenging. It's it's refreshing at the same time. You get the gin notes to it. So, we're really happy with this gin.
I'm so mad at Adam because I told him, hey, bring me he's like, well, we've got these three new RTDs based on our gins. I said, okay, cool. I only have 2 spots in my fridge. Bring me the 2 top sellers. and he brought me the other two and not the Tom Collins. So
Yeah,
well done,
we'll
Adam.
have to,
Well done, Adam.
we'll have to get you the Tom Collins down there, but yeah, this is usually what kind of sits on at my place. I kind of have a bar that has like, I always pick like one gin, one whiskey, that I'll kind of go through slowly, and this is the one that's usually on there for me to kind of go to. It's actually, I even kind of go to it without even drinking it. I'll just open the bottle and kind of give it a smell every so often, just because I'll sit there and be like, yeah, I'm liking this.
I'm kind of getting the feeling that you love the Fortunella, you're proud of the Afterglow, but this kind of feels like your baby, because you've had this like little smile the whole time you've talked about the Savage Love. This feels very personal for you.
It kind of is, and like about a year ago when we were really kind of looking at scaling these recipes up, this was probably the most challenging. So, all the R&D work, I was for about 15, 16 days straight, like 10, 12 hours a day scaling up, because when you scale up a gin recipe, it doesn't scale up linearly.
No.
When you want to go from like 5 liters to 50 liters to like 500 liters, so on and so forth, it's not like, oh, well, we'll just times everything by 10. It doesn't work that way.
No, it's the same with brewing. Like taking stuff from the test system up to the commercial system it's a nightmare.
Yeah. Except with brewing, there's a lot of shared information on doing it. Gin is very there's a shroud of secrecy in it, and also the variables. There's far more variables with all the botanicals. The more botanicals you have, the more variables you have. So like juniper actually is fairly linear, but when you start working with other ones like green cardamom, for example, I think going from a 50 liter to a 500 liter, I think it was like only like a 10% addition. It's wild. Like, and you have to figure that out. This was the most challenging one. I probably spent 13 days on this one, and then the other ones were kind of followed suit.
Oh, you definitely spent your time wisely. This absolutely rules. And yeah, like I'm getting the comments coming in, 4 by a lot from Michelle, then 321. Craig says 4, some distance, 321. Deirdre has 4, 321. Mike has the Sheringham just ahead, but 3, 4 as like his top 2. So yeah, there's been a lot of love for the Savage Love. Grant chimes in right after that and goes 4, 1, 2, 3. Didn't like the Sheringham. So yeah, I mean, this is clearly running away with the show right now. So yeah, I think that you found your audience here. I do want to say, how this shows with tonics. This feels like at 47% with this much punch and power, this should be, at least to my brain, the best tonic gin, just because of how big it is, because it should be able to handle it. So I'm gonna try that now. Also, I thought when I got these 2 little tiny cans, it's like, oh wow, am I giving people enough tonic? It's like I still have most of a can here. So clearly I gave people more than enough tonic. So probably didn't need both cans. And Deanne also had a hard time. She's going 4, 3, 2, 1. Donna goes 4, 3, 1, 2. Yeah, we have a lot of people. I think the Savage Love is the absolute runaway winner here. And yeah, I will say it absolutely stands up the best to tonic of any of the gins tonight.
And this one won the gold medal for Canada for at the World Gin Awards as well for London Dry Style.
It's a big London Dry, mind. Like, it's a very big gin. I usually, when people want to get a gin and they don't want to pay a lot of money, I've been a very big recommender of Beefeater's 24 because I think it's a very good gin for the money. At 45% alcohol, it's a very solid London Dry. I genuinely like this a lot more.
Cool.
Now, you have been talking a little bit about barrel aging gins. Do you have anything kind of in the tank that you can talk about for future gin projects from Last Best, or are you going to quietly and respectfully say no comment, let's move along?
Well, so we do have a couple gins that have been, actually, when I talked about Angelica, we have a high Angelica root barrel aged gin that's been in barrel for quite a while now. That we kind of just did. We didn't know what we wanted to do with it. It wasn't really, sure, do we release it? Or a lot of it was like seasoning barrels too. Like we're doing like most, like 95% of our time, actually a little bit less than that now because of we're doing these canned cocktails and selling the gin. So about 85% of our time is making whiskey. And part of that too is like creating our own barrel finishes. And so, we have gin and barrel that we don't know what if it's going to be a release. We'll see how it goes. But because the purpose of it is really to flavor the barrel, and then do some gin barrel finishing, later on, whether it's within our beer program or within our whiskey program.
Can we talk a little bit about the whiskey program, because it's not really public consumption yet in terms of releases, at least down here. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you got going on the whiskey side? Are you doing Canadian whiskey? Are you doing single malts? What do you have in the hopper for us for the whiskey program? Because that's kind of for down here new information.
Yeah, so we focus. So we've been doing whiskey. We started in Fort Mac. Like 7 years ago. So we have whiskey that's 7 years. I think it reached 7 years now. It's just a couple barrels. We didn't really get really bigger into the production. Most of our production sits at about 2, 3, and 4 years right now. So we're kind of in line that we're probably going to be releasing something fairly quickly. And what we focus on is typically we do malt whiskey, and it's usually all barley malt. But we play around with a lot of specialty malt, bridging the gap between brewing and distilling in a way. And then so we have a whole mixture of stuff, really. Like we've been really having fun with this. So we have everything from just a Pilsner malt, whiskey, that we focus on distillation technique, aging technique. We'll have, I think the max we've done up to 9 malts in a whiskey before, for a very dynamic flavor. We've done different grains malted. So just like, I was mentioning, we used to have a base spirit that was malt barley, malt wheat, and malt oats. We've actually have a whiskey version of that as well. So that's really what we focus on. So we're malt whiskey makers, and it really, we play around with a lot of specialty malt. We've done a lot of roasted malt as well, that we do. We have one that will come out. We do one every year, called an importer, and that's based off of like a Imperial Porter beer Last Best did in its very first year, that actually has some Demerara sugar in it. So we have to kind of see if we could call it technically whiskey or not, but we really like the notes. And so we made that, and it kind of like has a lot of notes of Tootsie Roll, like a Tootsie Roll
like
candy.
That idea. Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually wild. It's great. So we do that every year. We have a peated offering, like a moderately peated offering, that we do. We have a one, if anyone knows our Tokyo Drift IPA.
I think a lot of people have seen you drinking it so far tonight. I assume that's what's in the glass based on how cloudy that was.
No, that's I'm up in Campio right now, our Edmonton location. So that's Light Rail.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Light Rail Pale Ale here, which is my favorite beer here. We don't have it in cans yet, unfortunately, but anyone who comes up to Edmonton, pop in. It's a great beer. Tropical Pyramid is in cans, though, however, and that's very similar, just a little bit more ramped up on the hopping and the alcohol. But we do a Tokyo Drift. We would call it Tokyo Whiskey, and that is using the Tokyo mash bill, and using the Tokyo yeast as well. And we kind of play around with that too.
So I'm now getting a lot of comments of, how do we get this whiskey? Is it distillery only? Can they sign up on a mailing list? Can I get it and sell it? How do people get access to your whiskey program?
We're like trying to figure that out right now. And it's not like we haven't had the time to figure it out, but we're at this kind of stage of like, yeah, like let's release this stuff and do it. So yeah, we'll start kind of putting out the word on how to get it. There could, whether it's a mailing list or inquiry, or we'll reach out to you, and kind of see. We have to figure out what we're releasing first, how many releases we're doing, with it. So So we're just figuring that out right now. All we do is we just continue making it though.
Well, what's the
We know
best
that we have to keep putting stuff in barrels.
what's the best way for people to keep track of the last best heat? Are you a Twitter sort of place, an Instagram sort of place, Facebook? What's the best way that people can stay right on top of the latest last best distilling information?
So there's Facebook for last best, Facebook and Instagram, and then there's actually an Instagram page called Last Best Distill as well that kind of focuses on what we're doing with distilling. Heavily focused on gin and gin cocktails right now, but those are the channels that all of a sudden when whiskey comes in will be posted on.
Beautiful. Any final
Yeah.
thoughts there, Bryce? And I will put out a final request for questions for Bryce because we are wrapping things up here in the next little while. Bryce, do you have any final thoughts before we get final questions?
No, other than just thanks everyone. Thanks Kyle for being such an awesome host and all the questions and the engagement and really loving Savage Love too, showing that big props. Yeah, but I love doing this. I love making gin, and we're always looking for feedback, requests, and stuff that we could kind of get into some interesting projects too. So this was absolutely lovely for a Friday night.
Awesome. Thanks, Bryce. Last couple of questions. Where do you see the craft gin scene going in 5 or 10 years? Do you think this is just the bleeding edge of things? Do you think it's going to get bigger, or do you think we're in a bit of a bubble?
I think it's easy to say that we're in a bubble because there's so many options out there. I think it's fairly hard, but it's an exciting category. Because out of all the categories out there for distilling, it really it's like there's a very artistic side to it, an expressive side with what the botanicals, like you're kind of painting a picture with the botanicals as colors. So that's a very rewarding, that touches to me the creative side outside of the technical ability of making gin. I think the category will continue to be strong with it. I think there'd be more and more people getting into it. I think we're beyond that ideology of, I got drunk off a lemon gin or it's just everything, all gin tastes like pine needles to me. I think we're beyond a little bit.
Drink lemon gin. Oh God.
I think maybe it'll come back. Who knows?
I hope not.
There'll be someone who makes it better.
I'm sure there will be. They can't possibly make it worse.
That's absolutely. It's like Irish gin was like 10 years ago. Like if you ever had Irish gin 10 years ago, it was awful. And now there's all these like lovely Irish gins that have come out. But I think the category will still have kind of strong growth as well, as more and more as the craft distilling industry goes, because every craft distiller is going to release, a vodka and gin, but more the gin, because there's really not much you can do with vodka. And then, when whiskeys start kind of going up, that's going to be a big craft movement. But I still think there's always going to be some growth in the category. What I find is people have, the more and more familiar they get with how to use these gins as well, outside of a gin and tonic, that's where I think that's really going to propel the category too, and see the versatility in gin with cocktails. So as people get more used to making cocktails at home, and I think this pandemic has really helped that. For example, like it was like Campari's best year last year.
It was by far our best year with Campari, like a case a week sort of thing. It's been nuts.
Yeah, so I think people, they know, they're confident that they make a Negroni. Now they can try it with different gins. So I think that's going to help propel the category well. And we still see some strong growth. Like even within Alberta, I think the growth was around 10% growth, which was fantastic, total. And then local producers actually are having bigger growth. They're just a smaller part of the market. So there's going to be a local sense too, where that becomes, it's going to become a very regional product, similar to how you see beer now. Very popular, but it starts really kind of, why get something from somewhere else or a big name, when you could get some really well produced local stuff. And as more people get better at making gin locally, it's just going to become more popular.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bryce. This is great. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for joining us. This is definitely not goodbye. It's just see you later, because we are definitely going to have you back. This was a lot of fun. We will revisit this topic, who knows, maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year. God knows, I mean, the way things run around here, maybe in 2 weeks. We don't really know. So thank you so much. I'll ask you to stick around, and you and I will debrief just after I wrap up the tasting. For all of you at home, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a really fun, hopefully not entirely snowy evening, and you could enjoy some gin and possibly some tonic. I actually think they're better without the tonic, but I wanted to throw it in for those who like it. I had fun tonight. I hope everyone else did too. I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton. We will see you Wednesday night for Snake Lake. We will see you Friday night for a Spanish tasting. Thank you very much to Aaron. Thank you to Bryce, and thank you all so much for joining us. Have a wonderful night.